Wealth Our Way Wednesdays, 12:30 p.m. 15 minutes of finance. What do you do when you're starting from the mud with less than zero? No plan, no role model, no hero. Take to the streets, bring heat like De Niro, or tune in to Wild, the network, the thorough. If it was me, I'd sit down with a pad and a pen, hit my homie shitty thoughts with a friend. Tank is spitting real knowledge from beginning to end. 15 minutes, Wealth Our Way, let the lesson begin. Yeah, 15 minutes of finance with your man, Big Tank. Let's get it. What is going on, everybody? It's your main man, Charles Tank Harris, the founder, chief visionary officer of the financial literacy platform, Wealth Our Way, where our motto is, wealth is not only for the wealthy. Episode 208, we are wrapping up Black History Month, and we are wrapping up the series on money and children. Today is part 4. I'm going to talk to you about giving our kids their inheritance when they need it most. I was on a plane the other day and sat next to a gentleman who was in first class with me. His wife and his child were also in the same row. Me and him sat next to each other. Then across the aisle was his wife and child. And he told me about a book called Die with Zero. And that is what today's financial information is going to come from. But before we get into that, I want to wrap up Black History Month talking about a Black entrepreneur who is a personal mentor in my mind of mine. He is A.G. Gaston. A.G. Gaston, the thing I loved most about A.G. Gaston's story, I read his one book, The Empire That Was Built by Him. The thing that I like most about A.G. Gaston is we use the term these days called starting from the mud. And the reality is he started from right where he was. He was working in mines, and I want to say it was in West Virginia, in coal mines. And he realized that a lot of his coworkers, they barely had enough money to make it through the end of the week, but supporting their family, low wages. It doesn't really talk about in his early stages where he was able to get a nest egg of money. And I would guess that he was just a very frugal saver. But he started to lend his coworkers money. He was charging a nice amount of interest. He was charging 25% interest. It was A.G. Gaston was a bit of a loan shark, but he was doing it for the betterment of his coworkers so that they could have lunch, so that they could take care of their family, lending them money. He saw that amongst his coworkers that he was lending money to, he would see their widows come to the mine when somebody passed and somebody died. And they didn't have money to bury people. They were doing today's version of GoFundMe. They were going to the church or setting up a fundraiser. And he took it upon himself to start offering burial insurance to his coworkers at the mine. Now, why did that latch onto me? You guys know I have a background in the insurance industry, but what really made me take to A.G. Gaston's story was his expansion from level to level of his business. As an entrepreneur myself, I am embarking on some of the biggest projects that I ever took on. I'll be 53 this year. Some people are fortunate and their first out the door endeavor can be Facebook. For most of us, it's not going to be. And we have to learn to grow in each season of our life. And that's where I model my life after A.G. Gaston's, is because he grew. He started with the lending money, then he started with burial insurance, and then he decided to make a vertically integrated business. What does vertical integration mean? It means you control every level of that sales cycle. So if he's offering insurance when people die, the natural next thing to do was to also offer burial services. So he opened a funeral home. And then if you're performing the services, the next thing is to own cemeteries. He did that. And then he owned banks. He was also one of the things that we don't see enough of, in my opinion, in this generation. He didn't just rest on his wealth. His wealth was not just designed for him. He hosted in Alabama, in segregation and Jim Crow times, which you can imagine had to be very dangerous. He hosted the NAACP. He hosted Booker T. Washington. He hosted people who would help the cause of his fellow Black man, Black woman. And that's why today we salute A.G. Gaston. Let's just give it a big Wealth Our Way. Round of applause. And the man lived until he was 103 years old. He was a true player. He never wanted to say goodbye. He's like Michael Jackson. Never can say goodbye. Yeah, I know I had those bars. But anyway, let's talk about what I mean when I say giving our kids their inheritance while they are here. While we are here and they need it most. What's that mean? So I talked about my plane trip. I was flying, I want to say, from Newark to Atlanta a few weeks ago. And it came up that I was in finance. The gentleman who I was talking to was asking me my thoughts on how I tell people to plan for retirement. And he said he had read an interesting book. Now, so here's another interesting part of this story that I want to share with you guys. As you guys all know, I'm an inclusion guy. I hate that racism exists. I hate that we see color and all of that, but we do. That's the world. But the great thing about this conversation with me and this gentleman, he was white, I'm black. He recommended a book to me. He didn't tell me the author was black. He just said, here's a book, blah, 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 blah. I love that. I listened to the book on audio. I didn't read it. And it wasn't until there were about 13 minutes left in this 5-hour book that the author mentioned that he was black. So, and if you listen to, he narrates his own book. He doesn't have any ethnicity to his voice, any Southern drawl. He's from Texas. There was nothing about his voice to make me conclude that he was white or black. But I made the assumption that because I was referred by someone who was white, that the book was written by someone who was white. I love that the racial barriers are coming down more and more each day. This gentleman was just concerned about the color that matters to me most, which is green, and making sure that I knew about this book to share with my audience, which I'm doing today. So the concept of die with zero, you would think as a financial advisor, I'd be offended by that because I'm always teaching people about generational wealth, making sure they have insurance, don't leave your loved ones with bills. But the concept of die with zero is not a selfish concept. It's not a concept of depleting all of your resources without doing for others. It's basically a concept that I thought fit perfectly with this month's message. There's statistical data that the author of the book pointed out that says the average person who receives an inheritance in the United States of America is roughly 63 years of age. That makes sense because the average life expectancy in America is 85 years of age. And a lot of people have kids in their early 20s. So you do the math one way or another, and it makes sense that you die when you're 80 something, you leave an inheritance to your kids who are 60 something. Well, I'm 53 in a few months. I've been through a lot. There's been a lot of times where I could have used some money from Bun if she had it to give to me, but I've had to fight through and fight through and fight through. I'm not bragging about my financial situation, but when I'm 63, I won't need a dime from my mom or anybody else who leaves it to me. I've made my bread. Not to say everybody's situation will be like mine, but at age 63, when you're about to retire, there are a lot of checkpoints along your life where you could have used financial help if your parents would have given it to you. In this book, he talks about making sure that, we use the term now, giving flowers when you're here to get them. Give your kids money when they need it most. If your kid is getting married and they want to pay for a wedding, help them there. Your kid's going to college, help them there. Your kid wants to buy their first home, help them there. Your kid wants to start a business, help them there. Carve out what you would have given them in the form of an inheritance and give it to them when they use it and need it most. Now, I understand the natural flaws to this logic. The one flaw is maybe when my child is, and I have a 30-year-old, I have Bria, will be 30 in March. She's about to graduate from Temple Law. Once again, I've been fortunate enough to be able to help her throughout her life. But let's just say when she graduates, she needs something, she wants to start her own law practice and she needs $250,000 to start her own law practice. I don't have that in my pocket. I can get it to her, but I don't have it in my pocket. And when I pass away, she's in line to get a whole bunch of money from insurance and things like that I've set up. So she would get that money then, but she needs it and wants it now. And that was more the point of trying to set up ways to help our children now. And it's not always money. Maybe in that instance with Bria, I take out a small business loan for her or co-sign with her to help her. Because if I'm willing to take care of the next generation, my daughters or son, or their children, I can do it now just as well as I can do it when I wait. And the reality is yes, I may have less resources, but his point in the book is that less money will always be better if you get it sooner and you can do things with that less money. The other thing I'll say, this doesn't have anything to do with money, the second point that I'm going to make. If you feel as though, hey, Tank, what you're saying is great, I would love to do that, but I don't have the resources to give to my kids now, I'm always telling you about human capital. You don't always have to spend money to be helpful. We have in our society of Black culture, and it's probably expands beyond Black culture, we kick our kids out at 18. We kick our kids out when they're finished school. There's a way for you to give your kids an inheritance right there by allowing them to stay in the home and work and bank their money for the next 5 to 7 to 10 years if they're doing something proactive and positive that can help set them off on the great financial path that you want them to have. That's a way for you to give your kids their inheritance while they're there. It's going to cost you some of your personal freedoms because they're still in your house. You can't run around butt naked with your spouse. It's going to cost you extra money. They're still eating groceries and using the light bill, but you're paying it today and setting them up, ramping them up for a successful future. So these ideas, of course, lead me to Tank's 3 tips. My 3 tips, based on the die with zero concept, is to sit, and a lot of it starts with communication. This has been my tip on almost every week. Sit down with your children and explain to them what it is that you want to do for them in their future. Ask them how they feel as though they could best be helped. Once again, I just gave you the example of Bria with a law practice. That may not be what Bria wants. We sometimes have our own ideas of what people need, and we're not starting the communication and the two-way back and forth that will best help us understand how we can best help our children. And here's the great thing about it. If we don't agree, we don't have to do it. If your kid tells you they want to start a rock band and you're not feeling that, or they want to cut a demo and you're not feeling that, don't do it. But you have people normally give inheritances with some type of stipulation or desire that they can continue controlling the person they gave the money to. What better way to stay in control than to be alive when you give it? So tip 1, sit down, have a conversation about how you can best serve your child with an inheritance that they can receive while they're alive. Step 2, give serious thought to the human capital that you have available to you. All of us will not have the ability to build up enough wealth to give it out while we are living, because there's always the fear, what happens if we get old, we're not working and we outlive our own money. We don't want that to happen, and we don't want to become a burden to the very children we're trying to help. So think about how you can help your children with human capital and not always with financial capital. Can they stay at your place longer? Can you co-sign on a loan that you know you're able to cover if they happen to default, but you're going to help them not default? There are ways to give your kids healthy head starts, but we do those things. I know a lot of my friends do that for their children, but I know they didn't do it with this concept in mind. They just did it to be helpful. Lay it out for your child. I think planning is, I'm a financial planner. So of course, I think planning is the cornerstone of everything. So tip 1, make sure you have the communication. Tip 2, use human capital first. Tip 3, if you are going to not want to worry about running out of capital, you have to make sure, as my man Jay-Z says, you finish your breakfast, take care of yourself first, do your own financial planning. The best way to pour into someone else's cup is to make sure your own cup is full. So make sure you're sitting down with a financial planner and you have annuities, you have 401ks, you have IRAs, and you have insurance policies set to help with your expenses of burial and leaving money to your family. With that being said, tonight is the Financial Power Hour. We are going to have a great show. I want you guys all to join us at 6 p.m. Eastern. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining us on 15 Minutes of Finance. And remember, wealth is not only for the wealthy. Thanks for tuning in to the Wild Network. For more great content like this, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page at Wealth Our Way Network. Also, don't forget to follow us on IG and Facebook. Remember, wealth is not only for the wealthy.